Riot Games new patch with 0 million changes. Balanced strategy, as mentioned yesterday, heading into the back half of the year where things are pretty well balanced. We're going to be spending a lot more time trying to find opportunistic alt builds, alternate roles, and other things that feel like opportunities for players to express creativity. If you have any suggestion for builds or roles that could use a little bit of love, flicks that can be fixed, we'd love to hear them. This also can include things where it might take a little more time to land a more involved gameplay change to them, like Rexa returning of E damage or improving clarity and counterplay for low E. There are multitude of such changes in the patch: better balance of Warwick jungle versus top lane, lane Viego, AD Mort, Yana jungle, AD Sion, jungle Salas. In the meantime, our high level strategy is to be more nerf heavy on the jungle role, as we think the role is too strong overall and are avoiding not buffing it over time. Here we go again. We are in the conversation of jungle being too strong. How many times are we gonna have to say this until we do something? The amount of times we have said, the amount of times this conversation has been in this community, the amount of times. Yeah. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Okay. Yeah, I guess I think one champion that I felt like could be a jungler potentially was Urgot. I feel like Riot could consider making Urgot a jungler. It sounds really troll, but I feel like there is some sense in there, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Shaco has had an extremely high ban rate for a pretty extended period of time. At this point, we're looking to bring down his frustration overall, as he does need to be close to 50 to be a satisfying champion for his audience. Yeah, I mean, Shaco has a high ban rate, which is normal because he's a very frustrating champ to play against, right? Like basically stealth champions in general, and Shaco specifically, where he's very goofy with the clone and he can jump over walls and he has like an annoying stealth and very one-shot potential, multiple builds with the boxes. There's other frustrations in the kit that make sense. But I don't think it's only a frustration problem or like a ban rate problem here. I think his win rate is generally probably just too high, to be honest. So the nerf makes sense. So okay, whatever. Looking at the list, so I'm gonna talk specifically about what I like and what I dislike. So first we have Brand. Riot is trying to introduce Brand back into the jungle, and I'm gonna quickly take a look here because I forgot to do this. What was the last time? What was the monster damage on passive before Brand got nerfed? It was somewhere here if I can find it. So here it was 215%, and here it was 220%, and now it's going back to 260. Okay, I honestly, I'm not gonna spend time trying to find it. I think it was 300% if I'm not mistaken in the past. So we're kind of leaning slowly more towards that number, but it's not like there yet, right? So okay, increasing passive tick monster mod makes total sense, right? They're trying to make Brand jungle better. Okay. Q stun duration. I'm gonna be completely honest. This is the worst change of the entire patch, probably. I have no idea what they're smoking here. This is genuinely like every time they do these two abilities, I will flame Riot balance team. They did this to Elise Cocoon. They did this to Jean W. They did this to so many abilities in the past. Buffing CC is fucking stupid. CC is a problem in this video game. CC should be nerfed across the board to make the game better, to make the game have more outplay potential, 1v1s, 1v2s, 1v3s, whatever. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that this spell has 1.75 stun duration. I think 1.5 is completely fine. It's already on the pretty high end, but it kind of makes sense, right? He's a low range character. He kind of needs to have an ability that stuns people, so you have room to either chase and make your combo go off, or room to stun someone and run away. It makes sense. Why are we going to 1.75? Like, why not just buff something else? Like, why? Why? This is, like, seriously, fucking horrific job. And then the R cooldown going down, this makes sense, because Brand R being 110 seconds, I think, like, there is, like, you could say it's reasonable for Brand to have slightly less R cooldown than, like, an average jungler, right? Because, like, Brand R is more of, like, a spammable ability that sometimes won't have, like, a lot of impact if you don't get, like, the bounces off and stuff. So I get the R change. I think Brand R being lower cooldown kind of makes sense if you compare the cooldowns, like 2 minutes being, like, an average ultimate cooldown, right? Yeah, okay. Gnar QCD goes down by 4 seconds early game. I think this buff is probably a little bit high elo skewed and pro play skewed because it buffs mostly early game of Gnar. I don't think I'm super happy with this change. I think they should have probably went for a scaling change on Gnar to make Gnar just better overall for an average player instead of trying to buff him in a way where it actually makes him more of a lane bully, which is a pro skew change. So this is why I don't really understand the type of buff they're going for here. But yeah, I mean, the reason why I also don't like Q cooldown being lower is because Gnar is essentially a ranged top laner, right? If you're playing a ranged top laner into a melee champion, it's not very fun to be on the melee champion side in terms of laning phase, right? So this would just make Gnar be more oppressive in these matchups where he just spams Qs off cooldown like a no... It's also a no-cost spell, right? Illaoi. Passive total AD ratio up by 5% more and passive cooldown down by 2 early and 0.25 late. Okay, like some early game buffs here, some late game buffs here for Illaoi. This seems fine. More stats. Illaoi is, at the end of the day, a stat tracker. Kalista, worst champ in the game. AD growth up by 0.25, so she's getting like, what? Almost no AD, like a little bit of AD per level to try to not make her early game better. Okay, cool. EAP ratio up by 45%. So this is because she builds Rageblade, which has some AP in the build and Baron buff, right? So there is some more damage here on the E, which sounds okay. And then the E to AP ratio also goes up by 30%. Now, is there going to be a world where you're buying Noxious Tooth on Kalista? I don't think so, but it says here, this is a 13.5 to 9 damage per hit with Rageblade. Okay, cool. Mastery Q now functions with Kraken Slayer and Terminus. Okay, so this is a very small specific buff on E, which I think is okay. Kinda cool. Morgana W minimum DPS goes up by 2 to 14, plus 3% AP ratio. This is actually kind of big. And then the max DPS also up. So, interesting. They're trying to not buff Morgana jungle, Morgana support here. They're actually trying to buff Morgana jungle with these changes. And I think Morgana jungle is looking better and better. Nautilus E monster mod damage goes up instead of being 1.5x the damage. It goes now have a flat and a bonus and a AP ratio. Yeah, the number is very high. Nautilus jungle will clear insanely fast. I think it's scary for pro play. Kiana Q damage up by 10, W attack speed up by 10% as well. So I think these are actually pretty big Kiana buffs. The W bonus attack speed on mid lane matters in some matchups. Kiana generally has really strong level 1 all-in, where she can start W and just like auto-attacks people down, and this is gonna make it even better for her. Now, I believe, I could be wrong, but Kiana players I think right now are maxing E second, if I'm not mistaken, and they probably still win on mid lane at least, because you get anyway 10% flat value out of W anyway. And then the Q damage is good for like jungle and mid Kiana. So yeah, this is gonna be like at least 1% win rate I think to Kiana. Pretty good change. Basically more damage for her. Rek'Sai 4 base AD up, makes sense. I think this change is also fine. Buffs her clear speed, buffs like some early game skirmishing, which is supposed to be Rek'Sai's strength anyway. Singe Q no longer deals less damage to champions on red side. Q debuff, refresh rate 0.25 instead of 0.5, okay. A small Singe buff. Sion, passive. Okay, so Sion changed really weird in my opinion. Passive base health cost per tick goes down. So Sion will generally be more time in passive, which I think is okay. You could argue this is an AD Sion buff because AD Sion is stronger in the passive than tank Sion. I would say this is okay, right? But you also have to be careful buffing tank Sion here because this is essentially a buff to tank Sion as well, right? Because tank Sion is in a good spot, AD Sion is not. E armor reduction goes up by 5%. Okay, we can say that this is an AD Sion buff, but this is also a tank Sion buff. Tank Sion does ridiculous amounts of physical damage, especially if it goes for items like Hydra. So now, as a tank Sion, you're more incentivized to buy basically items like Hydra and items like Overlord's Bloodmail. I think this is a questionable AD Sion buff anyway, and the reason why I say this is because how many, like, AD Sion a lot of times starts with Q, right? Like, you don't have time to do E and then Q. So a lot of times you're not getting a lot of the value here of this E spell. And then the R bonus AD ratio goes up. So yeah, this is also an AD Sion buff as well as a tank Sion buff, but more so on the AD side. So I do think that some of these changes are maybe a little bit more on the AD side, but I think the tank Sion is just so much stronger than AD Sion that these are essentially tank Sion buffs, more so than anything. People are just more incentivized to play tank Sion now anyway. So I don't know exactly how Riot should buff AD Sion for AD Sion to be closer to tank Sion without buffing tank Sion. I'm not sure what the exact play here is, but I'm not sure if this is achieving the job. Sylas passing of this 150% damage to monsters. It's hard for me to say how impactful this is going to be. This is going to depend on Sylas's first clear. If Sylas is going to have a good first clear, then the champion will be a decent jungler in solo queue. But I think in pro play, Sylas jungle will sometimes be okay, but the problem it's going to have is that it's going to descale really fast. I think Sylas generally doesn't scale very well anymore right now. And after one item, he generally starts to fall off really quickly. So he's going to be very early oppressive jungler if the clear split is good, but it's going to fall. I think his late game is not going to be very good. Zyra equal down by 1 second, R damage up by 20 to 50. Okay, so I would say this is Zyra jungle buff, sure. This is Zyra support buff, sure. Slight Zyra mid buff, okay, sure. I would say these buffs are a little bit more skewed towards support and jungle more so than mid. So I think Zyra mid is not really happening here at all. But yeah, this is just Zyra jungle buff mostly, I think, where Zyra jungle is the best role for her. In high elo and in low elo, it's Zyra support buff, I guess. Okay, cool. So then we go to champion nerfs Jarvan. So, okay, Jarvan is losing 0.6 armor growth. This is going to be, by Riot standards, around 1% win rate loss. Riot did the same thing to 2 other champions recently, right? They did the same thing to Xin jungle, and they did the same thing to Elise jungle, and maybe some more. Riot is generally going against armor growth per level because of durability update. By decreasing armor growth per level, they make AD champions to generally be also a lot better, like assassins and stuff. Yeah, Jarvan has a ridiculously strong armor growth per level. If you get more than 5 armor growth per level, then that is very high. Jarvan is going to be a little bit less tanky with this, and yeah, it's going to be around 1% win rate. So Jarvan will no longer be S tier jungler in solo queue, but he's going to be leaning more towards A tier, I think. Which is fair, I guess. But I just want to say that, like, with Jarvan being nerfed, with Zim being nerfed a couple of patches ago, what other champion got nerfed? Like Wukong, I mean, Wukong is there, right? Blah, blah, blah in pro play, but I think BYEBYE is like the winner of all these changes. Like, right, Chandler is also going to be nerfed. Now, there's some BYEBYE changes, but we're going to see if it's enough. Lulu E cooldown, 2 seconds up, E damage down by 10, E shield down by 10, and 5% AP ratio. I think this is a very big Lulu nerf. Compared to the past, where Riot did a lot of placebo nerfs to Lulu, I generally think this is going to be at least 0.5% of win rate, if maybe closer to 1%. This will for sure matter. Nocturne, but yeah, it's mostly like early game nerfs to Lulu, I would say so. I mean, some early game, some late game. Nocturne, armor growth per level down. So same type of nerf to this bruiser junglers that... Basically, the reason why these armor nerfs are so important on these bruiser junglers is because they all don't buy armor. They actually just stack HP. A lot of his junglers go Sundered Sky, Cleaver, Sojin, or Starak. Like, these are the 4 main items that people buy. So they just stack a lot of HP, and then they have a lot of armor naturally via their kits. Now they're more incentivized to buy armor, like Frozen Heart and stuff, because if they just stack HP, they won't have a lot of armor, right? Yeah, okay, Nocturne, 0.5 armor down. This is usually also around 1% win rate. Q bonus AD down by 5 as well, okay. So they're actually going a little bit harsher, I think, on Nocturne side than on Jarvan side. Rel W shield goes down by 2% max HP. So this will be a Rel nerf that is actually going to do something. And it's mainly a Rel nerf in laning phase, actually. So Riot seems to have the approach of nerfing melee supports mainly for lane, like flat armor from Braum and Alistar, and now a lot of flat HP from lane. I mean, although... You know, you could argue that percent max HP scale is a late game nerf. I don't think Rel cares that much about late game shield. But yeah. I mean, it's a fine nerf, I guess. Like, what else are you gonna nerf from Rel? You can't really nerf her CC, because then she becomes useless. You gotta kind of nerf her tankiness, right? Like, her damage is probably in a good spot. Her utility is in a good spot. You probably kind of have to go around durability on Rel. Shake up passive bonus AD ratio down by 5%, Q bonus AD ratio down by 5%, Q cooldown up by 1. So very interesting here, AP Shaker is not really getting nerfed that much. I don't know the data around how good AP Shaco is versus AD Shaco. I think personally, AD Shaco is vastly underplayed, at least like in my elo, in high elo. A lot of times where people go AP, I get mad because I think AD is so underrated and so good in so many spots. So maybe raw data suggests that AD Shaco is better. I'm not sure. But okay. Chandel. So Chandel, I said yesterday, Chandel W needs to be nerfed. This spell is way too OP. It's ridiculous. Good job, Riot. This is a change that I have to praise. They actually went after the correct spell to try to incentivize Chandel to max Q, because a lot of players are realizing that W max Chandel is actually better than Q. This spell is ridiculously overpowered. And the sad part, I think the only thing that I would change is I would go after the moon speed on the spell, not after the attack speed. I would keep the attack speed high to make Chandel be good at brawling and give him less moon speed. Is how I would do it, but it's still correct to nerf this spell. 2 seconds also up on flat CD, which means that this spell will no longer have a crazy up time, right? Because at rank 5, Chandel could just W and then almost insta W when it disappeared, which was ridiculous. Xin Zhao, a champ that I don't think should be nerfed. Held down by 20, early game nerf. Base damage per hit down by 5. Also, mostly early game nerf. Okay. I think this is probably less than 1% win rate, but it's pretty close. Usually 30 flat HP is 1% win rate by route standards. YUUMI, Q empowered damage goes down by a lot. Wow, okay, they're slamming YUUMI here. 25 damage of Q. W healed and shield power, also down by a lot. W on hit heal, also down by 4, plus 1% AP ratio. Damn, definitely more than 1% of YUUMI. This is probably closer to 2% at least, and yeah, goodbye YUUMI, I guess, slowly, goodbye YUUMI. So, Lulu and YUUMI nerfs make me kind of feel like Nami and Milio are the clear winners, right? And maybe a Soraka a little bit. Maybe I'm missing a champion. I mean, Sona is also good in solo queue. So Mord is getting Q bonus AD ratio up by 120%. Yesterday I said that like AD Mord is a very bad thing to put into the game, but I think this is fine because this just unlocks certain builds like Sojin and Starak potentially. I think Sojin is probably the closest that you can get on Mord, nothing else than Sojin. Will Sojin actually be good on Mord? I kind of doubt it. I don't think it's actually going to be good. I don't think this is enough to make you buy Sojin, but it's something. And yeah, more AD Mord, it needs a lot more, or like more that we probably need more for items like Sojin and Starak to be like more viable. Rumble. So Rumble basically gets a bug fix where he no longer will deal less damage while being on red side, which is a good thing. Max Q damage will be now 3.5 seconds, so Rumble will get extra ticks on his Q. Q now deals damage to untargetable enemies if already debuffed. Okay, I don't know exactly what this means. Q now deals damage to enemies 700 units away if you are already debuffed. I don't know exactly how this reads. Q damage per 3 seconds will go down by 10% AP ratio and down by 1.2% target's max HP. R no longer deals less damage to champions on red side. R zone duration is now consistently 4.5 seconds across the whole zone. R zone is now more responsive. So these are good changes for Rumble long term, definitely. The reason why they're nerfing Q damage from Rumble is because Rumble Q is now getting extra tick. So it will basically be buffed, so they have to nerf it. There is a chance that Riot gets the balance here wrong, and Rumble is either too weak or too OP. Probably too OP is the more likely chance here. So they might need to nerf him again, but we'll see. Varus, Q damage down by 10. W on hit damage up by 8. E damage down by 40. Plus 10% bonus AD ratio. So Lethality Varus I think is getting slammed. I think Lethality Varus is probably that, and it's good. This is good for the game. Lethality Varus is being that is very good for the game. However, I'm afraid that on-hit Varus is probably also getting kind of nerfed here. I mean, on-hit Varus doesn't care about E that much, right? He's getting 8 damage of W and losing 10 damage on Q. I guess he's not super nerfed or not too unhappy, but maybe slightly nerfed. I'm not sure how, like, I think the play probably is for you to just go on hit and max W, and then you're kind of fine, I think. But maybe Varus players already do that at this point. So, Viego, attack speed growth down, Q damage up by 10, Q crit multiplier down by 25%, Q bonus monster damage down by 15. So, Jungle Viego a little bit unhappy already. Heal Mark Minion Healing up by 50%. Heal Mark Monster Healing down by 25%. Heal Mark Champion Healing up by 15%. Yeah, these are nerfs to Viego jungle, for sure. These are for sure maybe slight buffs to lane Viego, because you get a lot of sustain for free now. I don't know how big the sustain is, so it's very hard for me to judge how good lane Viego is gonna be. I am still of an opinion that lane Viego is very toxic for the game and very frustrating to play against, and not a champion Riot should push towards being a laner, either top or mid. I do think that Viego jungle is too strong and needs a nerf, especially because we're nerfing so many other junglers, which is gonna make Viego even better. So I guess we'll see where this leads us. Warwick 5 AD up, passive on hit damage down by 6. So this is a nerf because your passive will heal a lot less in the early levels, basically, is how this reads. So it's a massive top lane nerf, while not being as a big of a jungle nerf, because jungle sustain is not as important early levels. So okay, decent Warwick changes. Experimental Hexblade, overdrive attack speed down by 20%, override move speed up by 5%. What? This is a buff to the item? Experimental Hexblade, Wiki. That doesn't seem like a buff to me. So if you read this item right now, it gives you 30% bonus attack speed and 15% bonus movement speed. So it's a typo. Okay, this is a typo. The overdrive attack speed is going from 30% to 50%. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. This is okay. I think this is probably the correct way to buff the item, because you want the active to be strong, right? You don't want to just give it flat stats, because then it kind of becomes a generic item and not an item uniquely for champions that want to abuse the ult CD and the ult effect. So this makes sense. Baron Usher HP per minute down to 0, base HP up by 300, HP per minute up by 10. This is fine. This is to make it so Baron won't randomly regen, so it can't miss randomly a smite. Why is Viego a toxic laner? So the reason why I think Viego is a toxic laner is because the gameplay pattern of Viego is very uninteractive and very frustrating to face against. First of all, Viego is a
change means if you fire EW after one tick of Q hits, the spell does full damage, I believe.
So Viego is very uninteractive in my opinion, because first of all, Viego is a resourceless champion, okay? He doesn't operate on resources. All his spells are free to play, free to cast. Second of all, if you give him too much sustain via Q, his whole gameplay pattern becomes Q, auto, Q, auto, Q, auto. And then it becomes of, you have the damage to break him, because he also abuses second wind Doran shield, or you don't. And if you don't, then he just naturally overpowers champions via sustain. It's kind of like playing against Warwick. And the reason why I also hate lane Viego is his E. Lane Viego makes this oppressive frustration for me, where he is in the middle of the lane and then the E stays there for like 8 seconds or something. And then he constantly goes in and out of his camouflage range, where you constantly on champions can like lose vision, or your auto attacks or spell animations constantly can get cancelled. And I think that just creates a completely frustrating game experience. I don't think it's good for the game. Like, I get that Riot wants champions to be viable in the multiple roles, and I think they should be if their gameplay allows it to be. I don't know what's a good example of that. Like, for example, I think it's good that Talon is a jungler. I think it's good. Like, Talon makes way more sense as a jungler than a mid laner, for me. I think it's good that Zed is a jungler. Zed and Kiana probably make a lot more sense as junglers than mid laners. I think this is good for the game. I don't see how Viego's gameplay pattern makes any sense for a laner. I think it only makes sense as a jungler, actually. And that's kind of my take. Camille as a jungler. I'm not a big fan of Camille as a jungler, because, well, we had a Camille meta in jungle, right? And what the champ did was one camp into a very, very, very oppressive gank, because her E kind of like ganks people very easily. So that's kind of like where I'm at. Anyway, this is the patch preview, and those are my thoughts. Well.